All right, so we've established our basic units. So we have our monosaccharides. Remember, that refers to the fact that it is a single unit. And our disaccharide, which are two monosaccharides linked together. Of course, from now we want to build something even bigger. And the bigger structure is called a polysaccharide. Polysaccharide. And that term refers to many. Why don't we go ahead and try to write that word again? That didn't come out so good. Okay, poly. You may have heard that somewhere else, but it means many. And so these are many monosaccharides linked together. So you can kind of think of this as being one unit, and we're going to build these in a second. This is two of them linked together. And then this would be bunches of them. Technically for us, we're going to say anything more than three of them linked together would be a polysaccharide. There you go. And as you can see by the name that these are complex carbohydrates. They are starch. Starch would be things like you would find starch in pasta or potatoes or bread. Okay? Potatoes with an E? Dan Quayle here. Potatoes or bread. So those are good examples of how, especially potatoes, a good example of a plant is that's how it is storing up its energy. It stores it, but then we go ahead and we eat it. The cellulose you saw in the intro, all that plant material, the cell walls, that is a complex carbohydrate. Then you have this funny one, glycogen. Now in your muscles, you actually burn glucose. This is your energy source. Okay? And we'll talk about how you do that later on, but that's what you burn all the time, and you eventually can run out of it. So you store some up in the form of glycogen, which is sometimes referred to as animal starch. Animal starch. And you keep this on hand in your muscle, a small amount of it, then a bunch of it in your liver. And if you were running a marathon, you would actually work through your glycogen stores and actually have to replenish it afterwards. Probably along the way too, but that's a whole different story. Okay, so that's all the parts. You have the function here, you have the complex and simple carbohydrates. Let's look at how we actually build them. Okay, so here we have it. We're actually building carbohydrates. You have to remember that our monomer is our monosaccharide. We have an intermediate form called a disaccharide, and then our polymer is our polysaccharide. And very simply, if you look up here, you can see the actual structure of glucose. That is a structural formula of glucose showing you what it actually is. And in red here are all your carbon atoms. Color them right over. And there's actually one up there as well. And then, I'll just do it in blue. You have an oxygen here, and you have some other stuff. You can see the hydrogens and OH groups hanging off. Okay, but what we do to simplify this, because we don't really care about that, is we just connect the dots of these. We don't even worry about that one, this one up here. Okay, and we form a hexagon, and that's what you've been seeing here. Those hexagons are each glucose molecules. And it's what I've made down here to replicate that. Okay? And so we have a bunch of monosaccharides. Get some of these out of the way. And right here, we have just glucose. Glucose. And that is our monosaccharide. There's just one of them. That's not very visible here. So that's one glucose. So it is a monosaccharide. Now what happens is another monosaccharide gets bonded to that. Switch to pen. And there's actually a little bond that forms here. And as it happens, water comes out as that's formed. You don't need to know the process. If you're curious about it, you can go ahead and look it up. It's called dehydration, so loss of water. Synthesis. And every time this actually happens, dehydration synthesis happens every time you bond two big molecules like that in your body. Okay? No, I actually don't want to do that. So what do we have now? We have one, and we've just added a second one. So we have two monosaccharides together. So right now we no longer have a monosaccharide. So we don't have glucose anymore, although actually technically this guy is still glucose. But what we're looking at now is a disaccharide. Okay, do you see how simple that is? Remember the Legos? That we just take two building blocks and we put them together, and now we have a disaccharide. And that just continues on. You know, we can bring in another one, bond it together. It would have the same sort of bond. I sort of do a little V here. So we have a third one, and you could call it a trisaccharide. But really now we've gone from di to poly. So we have our polysaccharide. And that would hold true for, you know, I can bring in another one and another one. And they all get bonded together, nice and neat. I don't know why I'm making my bonds look so ugly. But then you have 4, and you have 5, and you have 6, 7, 8, 9, hundreds and hundreds of these, thousands of them, all bonded together. And that is our starch, or our cellulose, or our glycogen, our polysaccharide, our complex carbohydrate. Okay? And so that is it. It's just a building process. Hopefully you have a sense of how that works now. Now I'm going to back up just for a second, and let's bond these back together, because I want to show you something. That process of dehydration synthesis made this whole thing. So we have a whole big structure there, right there. Now, we need to break things down in our body. And so that process that we saw of dehydration synthesis, of building, we can actually reverse that and add water in through a chemical process. It's not as simple as soaking it in water. Okay, but we add water in. I'll just use blue arrows to represent that. And through that process, actually break those chemical bonds and end up, again, with monomers. So we have a monomer there, a monomer there. Maybe these are glucose molecules, and we can then do what we want with them. As I said before, our muscles burn glucose. They burn monosaccharides. And so if we eat a polysaccharide, we have to break that down. A little bit of digestion there. Okay? If you're interested in that process, you can actually look that up as well. It is simply called hydrolysis. Again, not required, but you know, if you want to go a little further with this, there it is. Okay? So we have the functions, you have the structure of these things. You can see you get something complex, but we're going to go ahead and make it kind of simple like that. We'll build them, we'll break them, and you can see all the processes that go along with it. Okay, make sure you've taken some notes on here if you need to, and ask questions. You know, just because this is a video lecture doesn't mean I'm not available to answer questions if you are confused. Just write them down and bring them to class. All right, see you later.